All right. Thank you all for being here. My name is Carrie Dillon. I'm the Managing Director of the International Textile Alliance, and we are the producers of Interwoven Textile Fair by ITA. We produce this show for our members, as well as provide this education for our members and our buyers. And I am glad to be here with you today to introduce our fourth speaker of the day, Mike Peterson, who will be talking about biophilia, the human need for nature. I want to briefly tell you a little bit about Mike. He is the president of Visionary Design Marketing. He's a speaker, author, business coach, brand marketing specialist, and founder of Science and Design. As a leading advertising director and publisher of the esteemed national shelter publications, House Beautiful and Country Living, Mike works with both regional and national brand marketers and advertising agencies. As publisher at Lux Magazine for nearly a decade, the Lux brand exploded both in popularity, brand recognition, and increased sales. In this capacity, Mike developed close relationships with luxury design firms, design centers, and interior designers in helping them grow their businesses. Mike's stellar resume includes leadership roles at some of the most established and beloved furniture brands in the nation. He served as president and CEO of LaBarge Furniture and as vice president corporate marketing for Masco's Home Furnishings division. Today, as founder of Science and Design, Mike helps to educate designers on their ability to improve the health of their clients. Studies from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, the United Kingdom, and neuroscientists around the world are an integral part of Mike's efforts to help designers realize their value proposition goes beyond aesthetics to include health at home. The design industry is considered an alternative health resource by science, and designers need to realize their enhanced value. Mike is a regular presenter at TISE? The International Services Exposition. Thank you. Bold Summit, IFDA functions, ASID events, ADAC, High Point Furniture Market, the Livable Design Summit, Pacific Design Center, San Francisco Design Center, Dallas Market Center, the Science and Design Summits, and Interwoven Textile Fair by ITA. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hey everybody, let me just say that we have a small group, so let's keep this very conversational. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to interrupt and say, "Wait a minute, what did you say?" So let's just make it a nice conversation. And I just realized that the last guy, I feel really bad. The last guy that was here was giving out leather bags, and if I had known we needed to give things away, I would have brought a plant, for biophilia. Anyway, look, I want to start with something that I think is rather profound. When we take a walk into the woods or the forest, do we realize that we're going home? Think about it. We're amongst the living, breathing plants and flowers and trees and animals, all of whom are connected to us as a species. You see, we don't think about it, but we have to remember we are nature, first and foremost. The amount of time that the human has been on the earth, 99.999% of that entire spectrum of time has been spent in nature. It's only the last several thousand years that we've covered ourselves in buildings and concrete and now technology. What's the answer to this problem? The answer is how do we deal with this? I don't think we're going to put the people like Apple and Amazon out of business. But somehow we have to find a way to mitigate the negative influences of this built environment. And one of the answers to mitigate that is indeed the design industry. Okay, so let me get started. Okay, this isn't working this time. Let's see if this works. Nope, she's frozen.
Sorry about that.
That's
Let's see. Is it off?
So while she's doing that, let me rip a little bit. You've all heard the word biophilia. Okay, good. really is coming on board more and more. But when I started doing these presentations 5 years ago, I mentioned the See, that was a nice interview. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is this. We want to introduce you to biophilia. I think obviously now I know that all of you know what it is, but we're going to take a deeper dive into where it came from, the origins. We're going to talk about the health benefits. Very, very strategically important that we all know the health benefits of biophilia. And I think of particular interest towards the end, we're going to talk about patterns, but also a word that we may not know and be familiar with, most designers are not, is the word fractal. And you will know what a fractal is by the end of this talk. A lot of this started back in the early 1980s in a couple of different ways. One way was there was a hospital right outside of Philadelphia that was noticing in the early 1980s, noticing that some of the patients were recovering from surgery faster than others. So they brought in Professor Ulrich from Texas A&M. He now heads up the medicine industry in Sweden. He married a Swedish woman, and so now he's over there and runs all the medicine in Sweden. But anyway, Professor Ulrich, did some studies at this hospital and saw that a lot of the patients had a view out the window of a brick wall. Others had a view out the window of a tree landscape. And lo and behold, he learned that those who had a view out the window of a tree landscape, their recovery time was cut by approximately 1 day, plus, and importantly, their use of pain medication was down 22%. Now, at the time, they didn't know why, but today we know that in our brain, our pain receptors are associated with the receptors that seek out pleasure. So now that those two are combined, now we know why the pain medicine was reduced by 22%. There are a couple of scholars in the world of biophilia that you should know about. E.O. Wilson, a Harvard professor studying insects, says that he realized that we have an innately emotional affiliation human beings do to other living organisms. Stephen Keller, a person I'll be quoting during this talk, talks about we have the inherent affinity people have for the natural world developed during the long course of human evolution. And I mentioned evolution several times in our first talk today, when people adapted to natural, not artificial or human-made forces. Again, a reminder, we are nature. And honestly, think about what it was like 100,000 years ago, 1 million years ago, when it was the knowledge of plants and soils and animals in the world we lived in that we had to adapt to. That was our world. That was an environment. In order to survive and prosper, we had to be aware of what nature was giving us. And I know this may sound strange, but we really need to get in touch with our animal instincts. And I know that may sound a little funny, but think about it. If we have to remember, first and foremost, we are of that species. We're nature living in an unnatural world. Now, Keller, in his book, Nature by Design, and if you like this subject, I would heartily recommend getting that book. It's just terrific. It's a great read. There's another one put out by Terrapin Bright Green called Nature Inside. Both of them will give you a great read on studying biophilia and why it's so important. Anyway, Keller says, look at that image, okay? Look closely. Keller says that natural form can be considered as a creative or compositional grammar for creating limitless varieties of design, art, and architecture. It's the original aesthetic. We have to remember that. Prior to about 10,000 years ago, when we began to commune as a people, the aesthetic inspiration that we had, the only inspiration we had, was found in nature. And so that's why it's still inside of our DNA and why it's still such an important integral part of our pleasure concept that we need to exist. Look at this image. Look at the movement, the fluidity, this softness, the grace. It's a perfect example of how nature can be the compositional grammar for design today. No right angles and no straight lines in nature. Look at this, where we live today. Straight lines and right angles that don't exist in our mind's inheritance. As I said earlier this morning, what in the world have we done to ourselves? Nikos Salangaros is studying this whole world and says the loss of this design model has its architectural counterpart in modern urban settings, which are stripped of ornament, patterning, detailing, and color. In fact, what's the only thing of color you see in this image? The sky. Maybe it's one of the reasons we're always looking upward to the sky, because it's nature to us. Think about what this environment, devoid of the natural need we have as humans, think about what it does to us every day. And I'm particularly familiar with it because, many years ago, I worked in Manhattan, downtown Manhattan. I worked along Madison Avenue in the magazine business. And I remember looking up and seeing the sky only between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Okay, walking down Madison, the buildings were so tall. I was separated from nature to that degree. Yannick Noah, who's at the University of Brussels, says the presence of non-natural things, and especially artifacts like cell phones and computers, printers, is ever increasing in the human living environment at the expense of what is natural to us, nature. And it's funny because relate this to your own personal world. When I heard that quote, I remember I grew up picking dandelions out of the cracks in the concrete. I skipped stones. We'd go down to the local park and catch tadpoles. I grew I grew string beans in my backyard and sold them to Mrs. Valentine, my next door neighbor, as an 8-year-old for 25 cents a bowl. I mean, I thought I was rich, 25 cents. But that's what we did. I caught lightning bugs and put them in a bottle. I had lightning in a bottle. And today, the kids are using their laptops and all of their computers while wearing headphones. Think of the difference. That's just in a 30 or 40 year time period. Now, I want to take you in a slightly different direction, okay? This is generally the type of street scene in so many of our cities today. And you can see what I lived through in New York. There's your 11 to 2 o'clock example, okay? But the world is changing, and many, many parts of the world are well ahead of the United States and North America in taking advantage of biophilia and the healing benefits of biophilia. Welcome to Suzhou, China. Look at the curvy linear movement, the connection to nature, okay? This is the Oasia Hotel in Singapore. Look at the abundance of natural sunlight. Look at the rounded corners of the building. Remember, no right angles, okay? I've never wanted to go to Singapore necessarily, but after seeing this hotel, I want to go to Singapore just to stay in this hotel. It looks so fascinating to me. This is Seoul, South Korea, the biophilic tower in Seoul, South Korea. Look at the fractals. Look at the fractal shadows on the floor. Look at the facial images on the wall. If you look closely, look at the textures on the wall. And look at the softness and the curves in the shape of the furnishings. A perfect example of biophilic ornamentation. And of course, Ha Long, Vietnam. Now, do you notice a pattern developing here? The East is so far ahead of us in understanding the healing, the calming benefits of biophilic design, a design that takes us back to a natural world that is inside of our DNA. Okay? All right. So let's look at this idea of nature. John Naisbitt says this: we will have a greater need to compensate for technology by being out in nature more often, going camping, going to the seashore. You may have to drag your children away from the computer or video games to take them fishing or bicycling. He wrote it in 1982. Prescient, okay, that he was able to instinctively understand what was happening to us. This is before, obviously before Amazon, before the internet. This is just about the time that the first Mac was developed by Steve Jobs, okay? And yet John Naisbitt in his famous book, Megatrends, was talking about what was happening to us as a people. So what is biophilic design? A lot of people, when they first hear the word biophilia, they're a little uncomfortable with it. Some people have said it sounds like a disease, but let's break the word down. Bio meaning nature or living, philia essentially meaning love of. It's the opposite of phobia. So philia is love of, biophilia is love of nature. And biophilic design is the deliberate attempt to design for the inherited human affinity for nature in the built environment. It's really important to understand if we strip away all these buildings and all the technology, and it's just us and the earth touching our shoeless feet, we are nature. We've just put up these boundaries in between. And it is a tool that improves health. Let me show you. Before we go into applying biophilic design, we do need to talk about this incredible thing that science is learning, and that is that connecting to nature heals. Now, we kind of know it anecdotally. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. This is the Khu Tech Puat. I had to practice that, by the way. Khu Tech Puat Hospital in Singapore. And it is designed based 100% on biophilic principles. Look at the color contrast. Look at the other natural color tones. Look at the extensive use of greenery. Khu Tech Puat Hospital is the standard in the hospital industry today around the world. If you're an architect or a designer ready to put pencil to paper to draw up a new hospital, you make a pilgrimage to Singapore to learn and see what they've done. A hospital that heals. Here's Maggie Center, now famous in all of Europe. Maggie Center at St. James University in the United Kingdom. Just take a look at the image. Okay, look at the natural color tones. Look at the fluidity of the lines in the ceiling, the lines in the wall, the abundance of natural sunlight, and pockets of greenery. So we know this is happening in hospitals all over the world. These are just two examples. The question is this: if the medical industry around the world is using biophilic design to improve the health of their patients, shouldn't we be using it to improve the health of our patients? Okay, let's follow the science. Let's heal our patients. Look at the opportunity we have to change the value proposition of the interior design industry. Science is handing us the roadmap. In terms of studies, and I could show you dozens, I'm going to show you two. This is the Rusk Institute in New York a couple of years ago. They prescribed for 107 cardiac patients time spent in a nursery. Not just to walk through the nursery, but to literally put their hands in dirt and plant flowers. The results were a decrease in the usage of the heart by 5 beats per minute, which is equivalent to roughly 6 to 7% decrease in the usage of the heart, just for planting flowers. This is Chiba University, and I referenced it earlier. They're using Shinrin-yoku. Essentially, they ran a test for 2 or 3 years in the early 1990s. They sent many patients out into the forest to spend time. 420 patients all in all. The results were over 12% decrease in the cortisol level and a 6% decrease in the heart rate, just because they spent time in the woods. I could show you dozens more. And if you want dozens more, just talk to me afterwards. Connect with me by email, mike@visionarydm.com. I'll be glad to get you more studies. So we're going to talk a little bit about design strategies using biophilia. And there are a couple. I'm going to focus on two, and that is the direct experience of biophilia and the indirect experience of biophilia. They're relatively self-explanatory. But essentially, direct experience is pretty much bringing real nature into a home. And so we're talking about real natural products like real plants. We're talking about other parts of biophilia like curved walls, like a little bit of mystery behind a closed door. Those are all elements of biophilic design. It's not just a green potted plant, but there are multiple elements that I'll be going through in just a second. So the second experience is essentially indirect. And this is, as you would expect, this is taking what is natural and replicating it, restoring it. It's like taking wood, wool, and leather and turning them into coverings and finishes, like aging finishes on wood. That's indirect experience of nature. And this is what it might look like as a difference. On the left, you have direct experience, real greenery. On the right, you have painted forestry, okay? So inside of the strategies, there are a total of about 15 different elements, design elements that Terrapin Bright Green talks about and Stephen Keller talk about. I'm going to focus on 4 because they connect very well to this sense of evolutionary history. And they are prospect and refuge, organized complexity, modes of mystery, which I would never have associated with the world of interior design. And then, of course, the use of fractals. Okay. So let's take you back 100,000 years. Welcome home, folks. This is where we lived. And it was only 100,000 years ago. This is what's in our DNA. You know, we didn't wake up to an iPhone alarm. You know, no heaters, no alarm clocks, no front door. We felt safe inside of our cave, our refuge, but we loved the expanse that we could view and look out, the prospect of what was out in the world. This is in our DNA. This is who we are right now. And it's why we love images like this in design. This is prospect and refuge today. I consulted a couple of months ago with a major builder in Canada and in the southeast of the US. And I just essentially told him, I said, every home you build from here on in should have a window seat because it's something we crave in our subliminal brain. It's important to us. It calms us, makes us serene. Here's another example. And by the way, this is so important as part of our DNA that we don't even think about that we need. Anytime you're photographing your last project, my hearty recommendation is to make sure you're getting photography from this point of view because it will immediately connect with the viewer coming to your website. Now, she won't know it. She won't say, oh, I know why they did that photography that way. But instinctively, she will relate to it more closely than others. So the second element of biophilic design is organized complexity in nature. Look at the multitude of lines, geometries, and scales all blended into this glorious image of beauty. All elements highly complex, but organized. And now, biophilia, by the way, is helping us connect and remember the original definition of the word geometry. You know, when I think of geometry today, I think of rectangles and squares and right angles and things like that. The original definition of geometry was this, break it down. Geo meaning earth, metry meaning measure. The original purpose of geometry was to measure the earth, the origins of mathematics. It's fascinating to me. Science tells us also that we're attracted to organized complexity because now that they have scanned and biomapped what's inside of us, we now know that the brain is a perfect example of organized complexity. And that's why we actually seek out organized complexity. We don't like plain walls. They're boring. We want patterns on that wall. We want complexity, but we want it to be organized. And today, if you want to see what organized complexity looks like, we can take you to Barcelona and see Gaudi's La Sagrada Familia. Look at this image. Look at the beauty. Look at the details. The use of human characters to connect with in the design. Isn't it amazing that he broke ground, Gaudí broke ground in 1880? And it has taken 144 years to complete. They're going to finish it, I think they say, in 2024. Now, just in case, hypothetical here, just in case any of your clients don't want to wait 144 years to experience organized complexity, here's what it might look like today. Perfect blend of organized complexity with a dash of biophilia thrown in. And if you're a kitchen designer, you build organized complexity every day. Okay. This is one I thought was really interesting, modes of mystery as a design element. Okay. Look at this image. This is where we live. What's at the end of that trail? What's behind the trees on the right? Look at the sense of wonder and curiosity and anticipation that we live through as a people. What can I discover next? Here's what it might look like today. What's at the end of that hall? What's behind the door on the left? Here's another. I found this image just about a week ago, and I thought I have to throw this in because it's just a powerful example of modes of mystery. There's several of them in just this one image. You know, what's behind the scrolling stairwell? What's behind the doors on the right? It's a great image. So the last element that I want to talk about may be the most important. And we'll spend a little more time on this. You're really talking about patterns for our brain. You're talking about fractals. So fractal, the Latin derivative is fractus, which means broken. But today's interpretation is fractals are self-similar patterns over a range of magnification scales, getting larger or getting smaller in scale, continuous, consistent, and similar geometric images. A fern is a perfect example of a fractal. Think of a snowflake, okay? Think of the clouds in the sky. Think of the waves crashing against the shore. Tree canopies, veins in our bodies, veins in leaves, okay? We're all connected by fractals. We are walking fractals. Now, here's what's interesting. Terrapin Brightgreen, and in this case, Rita Tromblin, have studied the really incredible value and the health benefits of fractal beauty. And she writes, the experience of fractals has quantifiable health benefits, including reduced stress, improved cognitive functioning, enhanced creativity and problem solving, heightened appreciation for nature, and positive emotions. Just because you're using fractal patterns in your designs, okay? Compare fractal patterns to that plain white wall. That's what we're talking about here. And the benefits of fractals have also been shown to appear within seconds. I just listened to something that Bill Browning was saying from Terrapin Brightgreen, and he's doing a session for us for our certification program this fall. And he has now proven and documented using scanning technology that stress can be eased as soon as 40 seconds into viewing fractals. They're so calming to us. So I love this quote, and that's why I put this in here. This quote from Stephen Keller. He says, humans have evolved to thrive in complex yet coherent fractal environments. Think of what we went through 100,000 years ago. We had to figure it out. Okay, we didn't have an answer. There was no highway for us. We had to just live inside of nature, adapt to it, and allow it to be inserted into our DNA, which we still have today. But this next sentence is what's most important. We perceive fractal environments as having the highest aesthetic value. Now think about this for a minute. Of all the different design elements that we have to work with, what science is now saying is that fractal beauty of all of them has the highest aesthetic value. So the challenge question really is, are we regularly using fractal beauty in our design work? Okay. By the way, you're looking at the solar powered treescapes in Singapore's Gardens by the Bay. Okay. Singapore, by the way, you've heard me mention it already. Singapore claims to be the city in a garden, and they live up to that with all new construction, all new building is mandated to include biophilic design. And I've not been at the airport, but I understand the airport is a perfect example. It's just of biophilia. Now I want to turn to Richard Taylor. Richard is also one of our faculty members for the certification program. And he says that fractals are the basic building blocks of nature. And so remember, we are nature. So fractals are the basic building blocks of the human. Okay. And look at this slide. You know, a cutout of a circulatory system and a cutout of a tree canopy. Sister images in nature. You could flip the color on those slides and they would look almost exactly alike. He goes on, Taylor goes on to say, and by the way, I hope you'll consider the certification program because Richard is from the UK, so he's got that great accent. He's also very, very professorial. He's got, he's got a big grin and he's got a big personality and he's got the long curly hair and he's just animated. He's a great person to listen to. And he goes on to say that we spend billions of dollars a year on pharmaceuticals to help us relieve stress and depression. He has proven that fractal beauty can reduce stress by up to 60%, and it won't cost us a nickel. Okay. Look at this. Another example of reminding us that we are nature and that the fractals inside of our bodies are equivalent to the fractals found in nature. And of all things, I was scrolling through Facebook, which I try not to do anymore, over the weekend. And this image was on Facebook. The lines of our hands, equivalent to the veins of a leaf. Do we need any more reassurance that we are nature and that we're connected to nature? Now, fractals have been around this is 2,000 years ago in Egyptian art. This is 1,000 years ago in Aztec art. This is 500 years ago, Da Vinci's Turbulence. I want to show you a couple of other examples of real life. This is real life. Because we're talking here at the textile, at Interwoven, I wanted to show how fractals are really basic building blocks in the world of textiles as well, patterns essentially. Look at the impact these pillows might have on a single colored sofa. What design element do they add? And here's fractals inside of a textured cloth. We're living with it every day, but all of a sudden science is realizing that we need to start documenting the benefits of what we just live with every day. We see fractals in fashion. Now, I'm not sure that the runway people are saying, oh, look at my pretty fractals. They're not saying that. But look at how fractals create beauty on the runway. Fractals in nature, man-made fractals. Perfect example of fractals. Self-similar patterns at different magnification scales. Maybe you could say these are God-made fractals. Here's a room filled with fractals, and look how wonderful this room looks. Against the wall in the shower, the pebbles on the floor. Fractals can be intense. They call this a high dimensional value of fractal beauty. They can be minimal. And here's a home of a friend of mine. She was one of my good customers at Lux Magazine years ago, Biophilia in Miami. And she didn't even realize, and I think this is what's happening in our industry, has happened in our industry. A lot of us are already employing some of these traits, but we haven't been able to put the scientific definition to it. Look at the artwork organized as a fractal element on the wall. Look at the mesh going up the stairwell. Look at the interior atrium with the tree canopy fractals. And if you look closely, there's a mesh on the back window, all to implement patterns and design that are based in fractal beauty. Now, if you were to stand in that very room and turn around 180 degrees, this is what you would see. Now we add prospect and refuge, safe and secure in our home with a view to the expanse of life outside. All right. Anybody recognize this school? It's an elementary school that replaced one that had to be torn down. It's in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. And we all know what happened there. The mandate to the architects and designers from the city managers was create a space that heals. And they did just that by using 100% biophilia and fractal beauty. Take a look at the front of this school. Look, first of all, note that it's concave, okay? No straight lines in nature. Take a look at the serpentine roof line. Look at the natural color tones. Look at the fractal stone wall. Look at the lyrical movement of the canopy over the front door. Let's go inside. Look at the treescapes, the patterns on the floor, the use of natural color tones, and the modes of mystery. What's at the end of that hallway? My God, if I'm a 7-year-old, I got to run down that hallway and find out what it is. Here's what it is. Look at that room. Look at the color contrast, the shadowing fractals, the soft movement of the furnishings, the abundance of natural light. What 7-year-old wouldn't want to spend time in this school? So in terms of products, you can find it throughout the home furnishings industry. Biophilia in furniture, lots of natural grain, lots of natural color woods, soft movement in the furnishings. You find it in fixtures, dining room globes that are hung in a pattern and maybe at different heights are perfect examples of fractals. You see biophilia in textiles and finishes, and you see it in art. Just take those 4 slides and build a room based on those 4 slides, and it would just be unimaginable beauty. Now, I always like to close my talks with a reminder that it's one thing to come to a seminar like this and then go home with this knowledge, but you have to implement it. You have to do something with it. So I showed these slides earlier today. I want to show them again. This is a web page that Clark and Clark Interiors, biophilic specialists in Charlotte, are using. My company built this for them. This is an ad campaign, first of 2 ads that we created. Now you understand, you see the textures, you see the fractal patterning, you see the nature scene, and how it can be incorporated into a room. And the ad that I love even more, you see textures, the cornucopia of imagery, the nautilus, and then in the room, in this particular case, you're seeing the view out the window, prospect and refuge. You see fire, an element of biophilia, movement, soft movement of the furniture, fractal patterns on the floor, and greenery. So look, folks, if you like this subject, these are the 2 books, Nature by Design by Stephen Kellert and Nature Inside by Bill Browning and Katie Ryan, both of whom are doing a couple of sessions for us in our certification program. I'll give you a minute on that picture. Maybe 2 minutes. Okay. And a couple of articles and newsletters. A couple of years ago, I began subscribing to Venetian Letter. Venetian Letter is produced in Vienna, and it tends to be a little more architectural, but the principles they talk about apply to interior design as well. I would heartily recommend that you subscribe to this. They've done stories on Don Ruggles, the author of Beauty, Neuroscience, and Architecture. Again, one of our faculty members. And it's a fun read. It's a fun and educational read. There's the article by Rita Tromblin called Working with Fractals. Just go to the Terrapin Bright Green website, look up articles, and you'll be able to find this particular article. And as I pull this together, know that we are launching a certification program in October market. It will probably be launched in the Hooker Furnishing showroom. And we are toying around with whether we can, I'm meeting with them again on the 7th. We're toying around with whether we can actually build a room that is designed 100% using neuroaesthetic principles and biophilic principles. So we're just seeing whether we can do it. If we can't do it physically, we may do it digitally. So we're working on it, and we'll show how the room is built and why we added a curved wall here, why we added a biophilic element here. So it'll literally be a walkthrough of how to use biophilic design and neuroaesthetics to help heal our clients. So let me leave you with this thought. One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. I just love the quote. What I love more is that Shakespeare instinctively understood it 500 years ago, before we ever started to think about the word biophilia or nature-based design. He got it. Our appreciation for nature, our need for nature for thousands of years should remind us today that we are nature. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir. Let me, I'm not here. Yes. Which will help also live in the world of New York City, which is not necessarily known for Biophilia. That will help us with that. Any other questions?
So what got you started on this path?
So I was publisher of Flux Magazine. It's December 15th, 2015. And I had responsibility for Colorado and Florida. So my salesperson in Colorado says, I've set you up for lunch with an architect. And it was like, architects don't have a great personality. It's good advertising story. His name was Don Rose. Serendipity at times. I'm an advertising. So he starts talking about how beauty improves health. And I said, yeah. And it was just like the first 15 minutes I was there, I just wanted to celebrate that. The more he talked, a little light went on, and then the more he talked, the brighter the light got. I remember this second with the Deltas in Denver. And that lunch changed my life. I felt plus. And you know, we had a lot of money to do with plus. My markets were the number one market. We were very successful. And I just thought, wait, I've got only so many years left to really make a difference. And here we come to plus. And we started learning, okay, and started to go in progressively my career to help him with design and realize that that's opportunity that doesn't go there. And we're just not there yet. And I'm on no person, I'm on a mission. And with my partner, Liz at Copper, who was in Toronto, he came to one of the lectures I did a couple years ago at Century, and it was like, boom, I'm in. So she and I have been doing this now for the last 3 or 4 years. And we want to get the word out. Any chance that you can help us get this word out, it's taking to get in there. It's not sure that Michigan State, that's not do a room of 100 different, 100 interior design students, and their faces were like, I mean, what? You're teaching these kids for the future. You need to understand neuro aesthetics. It's the backbone of good design. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I mean, my goal is loaded on chat. That's a neuroscience. He's our keynote for our certification program, and he just keynoted a year ago in dollars. That's my keynote, you know. And these guys are so smart. Our challenge is to be the bridge between academia. Those guys love, I tell them, they love to talk to each other. Okay, all these neuroscientists get into a room, one conversation goes to the podium, speaks for an hour, and then they all go home back to their own little laboratories. Okay, that word never gets out in the marketplace. Linda and I are partners. We first think in terms of what we do to get the message out. And so we're the bridge, taking all the big simple words, take forever to learn, and condense them and get them out into the that's where it started for me, and that's the mission. Oh, thank you, thank you. I hope you like that. I saw some smiles, so I hope. Thank you. Couple of thoughts. First of all, Nico's he was at the University of Texas in San Antonio. He's a professor of mathematics, but he's lobbed over into the role of nature-based design and urban architecture. He's at that. He and Richard Taylor both say that mathematics is the only thing you really think about shape and the roundness of a drop of water, all of those things. So ask your question specifically again. The geometric shapes that we find in nature, when formed together in varying scales, small versus large, by organizing them together, they are considered fractals. So whether it be a wavy line that is through that, whether it be the snowflake and all the little snowflake, those geometric shapes and forms when pulled together. I mean, this has become a lot of other industries. The idea of fractals has become quite a significant influence. Richard just worked 3 years ago with Mohawk. Mohawk wanted to develop a line of carpets that would help calm people. And so they hired Richard to help create perfect what they call dimensional value. Dimensional value is like a straight line has vertical dimensional value. But a Jackson Pollock painting has extreme fractal value. So they wanted to know for carpets what was the perfect level of dimensional value for a line of carpet. So they worked with him for a year and essentially developed a line of carpet for flats and he helped them develop that. So it's starting to happen. Now we need to get it out. We need to get it out of science. Now we need to get it already in Apple, which was earlier today, Apple and Amazon, some of the other major corporations. Now we need to get it through you out to the marketplace. Okay, your delivery system is like I love this. I feel that it is. Anyway, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, you too. Thank you. Good. Please help me with that. Let's get over there. But still moving us to that. Yes, I get it right. You bring me over today. Yes, very. Thank you. Now, one thing, just let's make sure, I'll just step on this. Yeah. Oh, okay. Are you, will you be more this side or the other side? Or about that? Okay. Coldest textile, grad design, grad student. Just graduated my master's. Yeah.
Right, just trying to figure out what's next.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. So, okay. So that's, I feel like they would take on with it. The good news is we've got it, that we really, I don't know, it's that when we first started doing this journey, it was like, you could zoom in on your shoulder and watch it. But I stopped that people to come here, so I didn't know that we definitely are. So we shared with our. Exactly. So we do that with, Dr. Nurse and with us and,